In the spring of 2024, the battle over human history didn't take place in a lecture hall or an archaeological dig. It happened on a podcast. Millions of viewers tuned in to watch Graham Hancock sit across from archaeologist Flint Dibble. For hours, they locked horns over a single, volatile question. Is the story of our past a lie? On one side, you had Dibble, armed with degrees, excavation data, and the consensus of every major university on Earth. On the other, Graham Hancock, the journalist-turned-rogue historian, armed with bestsellers and a theory that refuses to die. Hancock's claim is seductive. We are a species with amnesia. He believes that before the dawn of recorded history, before Egypt, before Sumer, there was a global high-tech civilization, a great maritime culture that was wiped off the face of the earth by a cataclysm 12,000 years ago. Critics call it pseudoscience. Hancock calls it the lost chapter of humanity. But amidst the arguments about stone structures and myths, Hancock keeps returning to one specific piece of evidence. It isn't a temple. It isn't a tool. It is ink on parchment. He points to a handful of maps drawn between the 14th and 16th centuries that he claims show the world not as it was known then, but as it looked during the last ice age. If he's right, these charts are the last surviving photographs of a ghost world. If he's wrong, they're just misunderstood drawings. Today, we are going to look at the ink, the ice, and the impossible geography to find out if history is wrong, or if the map is lying. The mystery begins by accident. In 1929, historians were cataloging the dusty archives of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. Inside a neglected bundle of documents, they found a fragment of gazelle skin, roughly 35 by 24 inches. It was covered in vibrant illustrations, ships, parrots, mythical beasts, and a dense web of intersecting lines. The signature at the bottom belonged to Piri Reis, an admiral of the Ottoman Navy. It was dated to the Islamic year 919. In our calendar, 1513. Piri Reis was not a monk dreaming up fantasy lands. He was a man of war. His uncle, Kamal Reis, was a legendary corsair, and Piri spent his youth raiding the Mediterranean. His survival depended on knowing exactly where the rocks and the currents were. He wrote the Kitabi Bahriya, the Book of Navigation, which is still considered a masterpiece of maritime geography. So when Piri Reis drew a map, he meant for it to be used. In the margins of this 1513 map, Piri left a citation. He admitted he didn't survey the world himself. Instead, he compiled this chart from 20 older source maps. He lists charts from the Portuguese, maps from India, and, crucially, a map captured from a Spanish sailor who had sailed with Christopher Columbus. For Graham Hancock, this admission is the smoking gun. It means Piri Reis wasn't just drawing, he was copying. And if you follow the chain of copying back far enough, Hancock argues you reach a source that official history says shouldn't exist. Look at the bottom of the parchment. The South American coastline flows down and then inexplicably turns east, connecting to a massive southern landmass. In the 1960s, a professor named Charles Hapgood stared at this strange curve and made a startling conclusion. He claimed this wasn't just a mistake. He argued that this coastline matched the profile of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica. But there was a catch, a massive one. We only mapped the subglacial coastline of Antarctica in the 20th century using seismic surveys. Hapgood and later Hancock argued that the Piri Reis map shows Antarctica without its ice cap. They claimed the rivers, bays, and mountains match the bedrock that is currently buried under a mile of frozen water. This implies the impossible.
It suggests the original source maps were drawn by someone who sailed the Antarctic coast when it was green and temperate.
This is where the romance of the story crashes into the wall of geology. Graham Hancock posits that this mapping happened roughly 12,000 to 15,000 years ago, just before the Younger Dryas cataclysm. But modern glaciology tells a different story. Ice core samples and geological models show that Antarctica hasn't been ice-free for 12,000 years. It has been covered in ice for roughly 34 million years. The last time those river valleys in Queen Maud Land saw the sun, human beings didn't exist. We hadn't even separated from the great apes yet. To accept Hancock's reading of the map, you have to believe that a civilization existed millions of years ago, or that our entire understanding of the global climate record is wrong. Mainstream historians offer a simpler explanation for the shape at the bottom of the map. It wasn't Antarctica, it was Terra Australis Incognita. For centuries, European mapmakers believed that the northern hemisphere had so much land that there must be a giant continent in the south to balance the Earth's weight. They didn't draw it because they saw it. They drew it because they felt it had to be there. Cartographic historian Gregory McIntosh argues that Piri Reis simply ran out of paper. When he reached the bottom of the gazelle skin, he curved the coast of South America inward to fit the page, inadvertently creating a shape that looks like Antarctica to modernize, looking for a mystery. But Hancock doesn't stop with Piri Reis. He points to a broader mystery: the sudden appearance of the Portolan charts. In the late 13th century, seemingly out of nowhere, incredibly accurate sea charts appeared in the Mediterranean. They didn't use latitude and longitude. Instead, they used a web of straight lines called rhumb lines, designed for compass navigation. The accuracy of these coastlines is staggering. They are far superior to the academic maps of the same era. Hancock asks, how did medieval sailors jump from crude sketches to near-perfect mathematical precision overnight? His answer is that they didn't invent it, they inherited it. He argues these charts are fragments of a legacy left by his lost civilization, a culture of master navigators who mapped the entire globe. He suggests these maps were preserved in places like the Great Library of Alexandria, copied and recopied by generations of librarians who didn't understand the math but preserved the shapes. We know that ancient knowledge did travel this way. We know that the Greek geographer Claudius Ptolemy compiled coordinates for thousands of locations in the 2nd century. We know his work was lost to Europe, preserved by Arab scholars, and reintroduced to the West during the Renaissance. Hancock argues this transmission belt goes back much farther than the Greeks. He looks at other impossible maps to prove it. Take the Arans Fine map of 1531. Drawn on a heart-shaped, cordiform projection, it shows a massive southern continent with mountains and rivers. Or the 1737 map by Philippe Boucher. Boucher draws Antarctica as two separate islands divided by a sea, a fact we only confirmed with modern radar in the 1950s. How could a French geographer in the 18th century know the topography of the subglacial bedrock?
To Hancock, it's proof of ancient surveys. To historians, it's a lucky guess based on the theory of balancing land masses. Boucher theorized that a frozen sea must contain islands to anchor the ice. He guessed right. But sometimes, the maps are just wrong. The danger of interpreting ancient maps is that ink is permanent, but geography is not. For centuries, maps of the North Atlantic showed a large rectangular island called Frisland. It wasn't a mistake. It was detailed. It had towns. It had a shape. But Frisland never existed. It was likely a phantom created by the Zeno brothers in the 1550s to glorify their family history, copied blindly by honest mapmakers for 100 years. Then there is the Vinland map, which seemed to prove the Vikings mapped America perfectly. It was hailed as a treasure until 2021, when chemical analysis proved the ink contained a form of titanium that didn't exist until the 1920s. It was a modern forgery. And what about the Dieppe maps showing Java La Grande? Believers say it's Australia, charted by the Portuguese centuries before Cook. Skeptics say it's just a misplaced and distorted Vietnam moved south by confused cartographers filling in the blanks. This is the friction point, where Hancock sees a signal, science sees noise. Hancock views these errors as transmission loss, like a photocopier running out of toner after 1,000 copies. He believes the underlying accuracy of the longitudes and the coastlines is too high to be accidental. He argues that the Piri Reis map captures the math of a global survey that Renaissance sailors simply did not possess. But archaeology demands hard evidence. A map is a drawing. It is subject to the whims, politics, and imagination of the artist. To date, we have found no underwater cities that match the scale Hancock describes. We have found no metal tools in the ice of Antarctica. The scientific consensus remains firm. We are the first global civilization. The timeline of human history is a slow, grinding ascent from stone tools to satellites, not a restart after a forgotten golden age. So why does Graham Hancock's story persist? Why, despite the rebuttals and the geological impossibilities, do millions of people want to believe him? Perhaps it's because the maps offer us something archaeology cannot, a sense of mystery. They suggest that we are not the first masters of this planet. They hint that history is a cycle, and that greatness and catastrophe has happened before. The Piri Reis map sits in a glass case in Istanbul, fading under the light. It may be a misunderstanding of a coastline, a mistake made by a sailor running out of parchment, or just maybe, it is the frayed edge of a memory we have forgotten we had.
What do you think? Ancient knowledge or ancient error? Let us know in the comments.